Amy, and good morning to everybody. This is a talk on adaptive horticulture, and basically it's how to continue gardening when we become disabled. So before I start, I just want to briefly introduce myself. I moved to Westchester County in 1992 after having lived many, many years in New York City. I had no experience whatsoever in gardening. The closest I think I came to a plant were the big containers outside of Rockefeller Center. But when I moved to Westchester County, my husband and I bought a small little house and we began to renovate the yard after 2 or 3 years of moving in. And from there, I developed a love of gardening. I enjoyed getting out in nature and digging up dirt and holes and putting things in the holes and watching them grow. And then in 2014, I developed a neuromuscular disorder, which really limited my life in many, many ways. I had to stop working. And from there, I was determined that I would really keep on gardening any way that I could, which led me to the Master Gardeners and volunteering and so on. But I wanted to show you a little bit of my house. That was my house. It really had nothing. It was really bare bones. And then these gardens were built up over the years. And I can tell you that I dug up every single piece of this yard, as my husband will attest. And I planted every single plant, except for the big trees and shrubs. And I took care of this garden as well. This is the side yard. And this is also the front yard as well. So you can see that I really developed a love of gardening. And I understand how hard it can be to accept disability in our lives. But there is a way to keep on going if we think about what our disability entails and we make adjustments for those disabilities. So moving on. I just wanted to get through a couple of nuts and bolts about what is a disability. And basically, it's a condition which impairs a person's structure, body structure, or function, including at times our mental functioning. The CDC defines a disability as any disorder that makes it more difficult for an individual to do certain activities and interact with the world around them. And these include motor, sensory, and mental health. Motor is basically movement and strength. And sensory, of course, includes vision, hearing, or speaking. There are legal definitions to disabilities, and these include any disorder that physical or mental that limits one or more major life activities. My favorite, however, is the American Disability Act definition, which includes not only the above, but also involves to do other important things. So our disability is any physical or mental problem that makes it difficult to walk, see, hear, speak, learn, or do other important things. So it kind of like leaves a very wide definition of what a disability could be. The World Health Organization in 2018 said that a disability is any condition that limits activity, leads to limited body function, and then that leads to limited activities and, of course, a restriction or participation in activities. In 2011, the World Health Organization said almost everyone will be temporarily or permanently impaired at some point in their life. And that, when I read that, I said to myself, well, yeah, that sounds kind of true. And of course, there is a growing number of disabilities in the elderly because of the large boomer population. And just to cap all this in terms of numbers, in 2019, about 15% of the world's population, which was over 1 billion people, lived with some form of disability. And of that 15%, about 2.5% or around 190 million people experience significant difficulties in functioning. So, moving on. We classify disabilities on whether they're congenital or acquired. Congenital disabilities are those which we are born with, like cerebral palsy, and are far beyond the scope of this discussion. Acquired disabilities are those which develop during our lifetime, and these could be classified as either temporary, for which complete or near complete recovery is expected. And for example, let's say someone has carpal tunnel, they go in for surgery, they get physical occupational therapy, and they have pretty much near normal use of their hand and wrist. Permanent disabilities, however, are disabilities which have long-lasting impact on the functioning of the individual and alter our activities of daily living or even our careers. And those include the aftermath of strokes, and so on. So I'm going to basically hone in on the acquired disabilities, because really in the adult population, that's more or less what we're dealing with. And these disabilities can be traumatic, involving our brain or our spinal cord. They can involve our joints, particularly our hips or knees, shoulders, back, wrist, and fingers, which limit our mobility. This may include frozen shoulders, carpal tunnel syndrome, and so on. It might include degenerative conditions such as osteoporosis or osteoarthritis, and result in limitations of movements of our joints or conditions such as cervical lumbar radiculopathies. And these can result from a condition called stenosis, which is very common as we get older. Strokes can limit our movement, speech, vision, dexterity of our limbs. And diseases which may not be neurological in nature, but which may have many remote effects on our neurological system, such as cancers, infectious diseases such as Lyme disease, and even COVID-19. So disabilities can involve our arms, our legs, the dexterity of our hands. It can result in weakness or paralysis if our cord or brain is involved, and it also can involve our vision, our hearing, and also our cognition. Any questions?
Okay. I think there is a question in the chat.
Okay.
Adrian was going to read that. It looks like Adrian is not able to use her mic right now. That one of the questions is, I'm part of a committee to investigate making our community garden more user-friendly for the physically challenged. Will you include websites that have useful to our search? So I think we can provide resources.
I don't have any in my bibliography, but I think they're widely available. Basically, what I used were books, believe it or not. So I can't help you right now with that particular question, but maybe I could.
Yeah,
okay.
we can maybe we can do some search to see, and
Absolutely.
you can look at that. Yeah, great. And we'll follow up. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, push on.
Yes, please.
Okay. So in terms of gardening, gardeners age, and of course, as they age, they develop disabilities, but we can continue to garden and be active with some adjustments to our usual routines. And, you know, we like to garden because we like to grow things. I know that personally, I like to see a seed go into the soil, germinate, become a mature plant or vegetable, tree or shrub. There's a sense of enjoyment, peace, fulfillment, and harmony with nature. It relieves stress, challenges the mind, and of course, we do something good for people. We feed people, we make things pretty for the environment. So gardening all around is a good thing to keep on doing. It is also a great exercise because we use all our major muscle groups and joints in both our arms and legs. We use our thumb and index finger for grasping and hand coordination. It increases our endurance, gets us out into the fresh air, and also challenges us. So, what adaptations do you need to continue gardening with a disability? And of course, this depends on what your disability is. Everybody is different, and they have different disabilities involving different parts of their body, and so results in different challenges. And the thing to keep in mind is disabilities are not always static, meaning that they are fluid and can change as the situation and time warrants. And the time, when I put in time warrants, it could be years that we're talking about, not just simply days or weeks or even months. However, when we deal with the challenge of a disability in the garden, we need to be realistic and maybe brutally honest about assessing our abilities in the garden. What you were able to do in the past and what you would like to do in the present might need to be reassessed. And this may include a discussion with either a therapist or a physician, specifically a physiatrist who specializes in rehab medicine. You can always think big, but start small. And some things you need to think about when you have a disability and you're gardening. Can I bend down? Can I stand up on my own volition or without getting dizzy? Can I walk on my own? Do I need assistance? How far can I walk at any given time? Can I get up and down a curb or up from a kneeling position or use one hand while standing? Can I stand on one foot? Is there a place for me to sit down or lean on for rest? This is called conserving energy and very important for the disabled to do. Can I get my own tools, water, hose, dirt, mulch, or compost without any difficulty? Do I need frequent rest periods? Do I need a shaded area? Is there a certain period during the day when I'm more productive than at other times of the day? So, on the way to the garden, we need to think about paths. And many paths that are put down are predetermined without necessarily any input from the disabled. But stability and safety always come first. When you assess the pathway, you need to know, will I need support crossing the pathway, either with a cane, a cart, or a wheelbarrow, or poles? And most common materials used for paths are wood chips, gravel, asphalt, cement, or brick. When we think of paths, hard surfaces for the disabled are a better choice than wood chips or turf, which are unlevel. Are steps or ramps necessary to get to the garden? Do those steps or ramps have handrails? The ramps should not exceed 5% of a slope, which means that for every change of 1 foot in slope, you need 20 feet of path. And you always need to evaluate for potential areas for tripping or loss of balance. So path materials can be either brick or crushed stone, which provides good traction and drainage. The stone should probably ideally be about 1/2 inch in diameter. It should be used with fine ground gravel, which is approximately 3/8 of an inch in diameter. In combination, these stones form a firm, solid pavement, allowing for the use of wheelchairs or walkers if necessary. Asphalt and concrete are cheaper alternatives, but they do get hot and they do crack with time. And of course, there's always turf and wood chips, I guess. I didn't put that in, but that's also there. So here is a picture that I wanted people to see. This is a incline. This is a kind of like a driveway with the asphalt. There's a curb. And you can see this is not a straight pathway. There's lots of dipping down and there's hidden roots and branches. And these are all problems that disabled people need to be aware of and evaluate in terms of their walking and accessing a pathway. And this leads me to the concept of sight scanning. So sight scanning is while walking, looking for hidden things in plain view, which might impact on walking. So first you need to scan from left to right or right to left, approximately 4 or 5 steps ahead. Then scan vertically back to your feet. Next, look up and scan for people at signs or signs at eye level. This formal definition came from an organization called Vision Aware. So in the prior picture, you could see the unlevel landscape, large roots, stones, branches, all of which impact on your gait and balance. And it's like what I like to call situational awareness of your body in space and time at all times. So this is a series of steps which have no handrail, which would not be good for disabled people to use. This is a slippery slope of stones, which can be dangerous even in dry weather. And of course, paths, even concrete and asphalt heave and crack, which can be dangerous and difficult to negotiate for disabled people. Steps that have handrails are better. Wood chips are what everybody likes to use. They're ubiquitous in gardening. People like it because of the mulching, and I guess it looks kind of nice and natural. But you can see that the wood chips are very variable in length and diameter, and it's very difficult to get your balance on wood chips when you're walking if you have serious issues with your gait or balance. And of course, if you're using wood chips, you should probably use a pad for comfort and support. This is a nice brick pathway with containers at various heights and lengths. This is nice, but takes a bit of money and also a bit of care in terms of the grouting. And this also is subject to heaving during cold weather. Here's another picture of a path on the way to the garden, which has a lot of branches, stones. And so this can be fairly difficult for people to navigate. Any questions?
Okay, we don't have any open questions at the moment.
Okay, so we'll keep on going. I added this picture. These are my trekking poles, and I use these on an almost daily basis. During the spring, the summer, and the fall, they're in my car every single day. And I use them to walk around and to even get to the garden. I like them because these are not ski poles. They have a soft rubber tip which comes off, and underneath it is a rounded, like pick kind of thing that you could use in icy conditions or snowy conditions for a better grip. But the important thing in this picture is the basket. If you recall, a ski pole basket is flat and it has holes in it to let the snow go through. This is more of a cup-like basket with no holes. And the point of this is that the pole does not sink into the ground. So if you're walking on soft soil or mud or sand, you can use the pole in either hand, mimic a normal gait with your arms swinging, and have a little bit more stability and strength. The handles have a Velcro wrist band, which wraps around your wrist. It goes through that hole there. I don't use the Velcro wristbands much because I find them uncomfortable. They come off when you press down on the red tab. And the newer poles I saw recently also have handles that go up and down and can be adjusted for whatever you find comfortable. This pole also is adjustable in height, so it's, tall people, short people, anybody can use them. What I like about them is that they mimic a natural gait with your arms swinging. And so if you have to carry things, you can carry them either in a backpack or in a messenger bag, which sort of distributes weight across your body. And if you've ever seen somebody carrying something in one hand and they have an unsteady gait, you can see them wobbling around. They look terribly unsteady. And so we should really try and avoid that as much as possible in the garden. So if you have impaired mobility, paths should always be firm, level, smooth, and wide. A wheelchair is approximately 28 inches from side wheel to side wheel, 36 inches from back wheel to front wheel, and a walker varies in terms of its width and height. And the smallest one that I could find on the internet was about 23 inches wide. So any path that you develop needs to accommodate these dimensions. Another concept that I want to bring up is fatigue and conserving energy. Fatigue is very common in both acute and chronic disabilities and can be due to a variety of issues such as sleep, nutrition, medications, and so on. You should probably discuss all these things with your physician. But I will tell you that one thing about fatigue that I did ask a physician a couple of years ago. I would say to him, "Why do I feel so tired at the end of the day?" And he told me it's because of what they believe to be the circadian distribution of a particular hormone called cortisol in your body. This is the fight or flight hormone that people often talk about. It's produced in our adrenal gland. It's higher in the morning and then decreases as the day goes on. So there is a medical reason for all these reasons why people get tired during the day. And energy conservation is the ability to manage this fatigue throughout the day. So, for example, if you know that this is a problem with you, you have to plan gardening in the beginning of the day. You have to plan doing big chores earlier. Big chores may need to be divided, so they may take several days to do as opposed to one day. And that's part of your body and part of what you need to be aware of. You should also consider helping yourself. You need to carry heavy objects close to your body, bend your legs, keep your spine straight when picking objects up from the ground. You have to avoid bending at the waist, which I do all the time. And you always need to use the proper tools that are comfortable for you. You should always try to avoid repetitive tasks, maintain proper posture, sit down, take frequent rest. And do you need help? We don't always like to ask for help, but do you need help? And that if we have a gardening buddy or someone we can rely on, you should ask. But you should always be aware of safety. Safety always comes first. You need to be aware of both your vertical and horizontal reach. Those are the reaches that you can safely perform chores. So vertical reach is by placing arms overhead in either or both a sitting or standing position. So if my arm can only go up 2 feet above my head in either a sitting or standing position, and something is 5 feet over my head, that's not going to work. I can't garden like that. The other thing that you have to be aware of is your horizontal reach with arms placed parallel to the ground while sitting or standing. So, for example, if I have a container garden that's 5 feet in diameter and my arm can only reach horizontally 2 feet, and even if I can swing around the container, that's a foot that's in the middle of the container that I'm not going to be able to reach, and therefore I'm not going to be able to safely assess it. So it's all about performing chores, and we need to perform them safely when we're in the garden. You should always consider a buddy system. You should always have a phone nearby in case of an emergency. If you don't have a phone, how about just carrying a stupid whistle? I saw the other day that there is a whistle app on the phones. It's not loud. You can probably blow louder, but at least it's a help. You should always keep yourself hydrated and use an umbrella for shade if no tree is available. Always try to conserve energy. Don't try to push beyond your limits. And you should always try to garden when you're at your best. Avoid high heat and humidity. Make lists to do for the most important chores first. And the other thing is to carry tools safely, either across your back, like in a messenger bag or a backpack, evenly distributing weight with hands free to aid in balance and walking. So, as a gardener with a disability, I like container gardening because it's very helpful if you're standing for prolonged periods. It's difficult. Container gardens can be incredibly productive and helpful for balance problems because we can sit down. The containers come these days in many different materials, heights and shapes, can accommodate wheelchairs and walkers, can be mobile with the addition of wheels so they can come to us if need be. And they also can be trellised so that we can also continue to garden vertically if you're in a balcony or porch situation. And this was one of my container gardens a couple of years ago, and you could see that it is incredibly productive. I grew corn, tomatoes, some ornamentals here, and a lot of other things as well. That's the side view of the container garden. And the containers are at all different heights. So, I can kneel, sit in the bench and lean over too sometimes. But they are a good option for people who have disabilities. Here's a container garden on a ramp, which is composed of a wood, and it has a vertical trellis. And here's a nice picture. We're not limited by our disabilities. Here's a fellow in a wheelchair who's able to get his wheelchair under the container garden. What I like about this particular picture is that the back of the container garden is elevated so that this gentleman can reach to the back, and there is no limitation in terms of reaching the soil. The other thing to think about when you're disabled are tools, and telescopic tools are available and they're very helpful. They have different heads, so you can use them for a number of different chores. Tools with foam and padded handles are available for comfort. You can consider tools that use support for both our wrists and elbows so that our shoulders and upper body do most of the work. And the other thing is you can consider garden tools designed for children, which are lightweight and easy to carry. This is one of my favorite tools. It's a spade that had a long wooden handle once upon a time. The handle broke off. I thought I would fix it, but I never did. But I like it so much, I continue to use it. I hold on to it. I get through weeding a container very quickly. It's easy to maneuver for me. You can see that tools have telescopic handles, and there's a wide variety of these tools out on the market, and they have many different heads on them. This is a push cart, so you can load it up comfortably and hang on to it like a walker maybe, or a cart, and that could be helpful. I include this because a lot of people use it. I am not a fan of it. I think it's kind of awkward to garden at this kind of sitting level, but a lot of people use it. It could be a little difficult to carry. It looks kind of cumbersome, but it does have a little pouch on the side to carry tools. The other thing that I was looking at just recently is a garden apron, and these things look kind of helpful. I mean, you can stuff them full of tools and wrap them around your body, so you don't really necessarily have to worry about a backpack or a messenger bag. This is my gardening buddy Susan's tool. It's a weeder, but I include it here because it's got this piece of metal, and you can put your wrist through there and weed. And the nice thing about this is if you have carpal tunnel syndrome, it prevents overextension or overflexion of the wrist, and it holds the wrist in a physiological neutral position, which is what you want when you have carpal tunnel. Here's some more example of tools. This is a telescopic shovel, padded foam handles. This is my rake, which I bought this season. It's very small considering that it's a rake. It's incredibly lightweight. It's got a smaller head than typical, which makes it really maneuverable in the container and also in my hands. The other thing to consider is water. Most people use hoses, but there's also drip lines. It can be expensive, but it can also be inexpensive too, depending on what kind of system you use. Just remember that a water can be heavy to carry. And of course, whatever watering system you use, make sure that the lines are tied up neatly, because this is really a disaster in the garden if they aren't. They're a real source of tripping and falling. The other thing to consider is plants. So, is the garden going to be mostly for vegetables or for perennials? Is it going to be labor intensive or not? Perhaps if you don't want a labor intensive garden, maybe you should consider conifers or trees, shrubs, ornamental grasses instead of high maintenance plants. So, in summary, know and be aware of your limitations. Be aware of your body space and time, in space and time. Scan the area around you for any potential areas of falling. Try to avoid quick turns. Ask for help if needed. Always carry a phone or whistle for help. Use aids when needed. Adapt tools when able. Use an umbrella for shade or a bench or a place to rest when needed, and always stay hydrated. Gardening should never ever be an impossible task. And a final thought, always gardening should be an enjoyable experience or hobby, no matter what our age level, absence, or presence of impairments. And I want to thank everybody. Are there any questions?
Right now, there are no questions.
Is that good or bad?
So we have some time.
Yeah.
So if you have anything else you'd like to elaborate on, we could do that.
Okay, Charlotte raised her hand.
Okay. All right. Since we have time, I guess we could ask people to speak. And there is a question now in the chat also. I don't know if you can see it, Adrienne, if you want to read that one, and then we can go on to Charlotte.
Okay, I will read the question. Hold on, let me get back to there. No, I don't have it in my box.
Oh, okay, then I will read it.
Wait, okay. Oh, it came in chat. Let me try there. Okay, let's go. Yes, it's from Barbara. I have 2 artificial knees and was told to always use a kneeling pad. Is that good for gardening too?
Yes, I had a kneeling pad in my presentation. I don't go anywhere without my kneeling pad. I don't know how you kneel on wood chips or brick or asphalt or anything without a kneeling pad. So the answer is, yeah, use it all the time. I would think that, being somebody who has artificial knees, that does supply a bit of support and comfort for your knees when you're gardening.
Okay, looks like we're getting some more questions in here.
Questions.
Can you,
Okay.
can you see
Yes,
them,
I have
Adrian?
them. Yep.
Okay, great.
Do you know of any sources for gardening tools, online or local?
Okay, I would say that you just have to go to your garden center. The most important thing about gardening tools is that you try them out to make sure that you're able to use them correctly and that they feel comfortable in your hand. So, you know, you might need extra padding, less padding, and so on and so forth.
Okay. Another question. Watering is a concern from our gardeners. How do you suggest we help with watering the area that is 50 feet away from our water source?
Aye. Well, is it possible to get some drip irrigation going or not possible? I mean, these days, I remember when we put drip irrigation into our garden, it was a big deal. But these days, there are sources that you can run lines, plastic lines, fairly cheaply from the water source into the garden. The other thing might be a dedicated line for a water sprinkler or a hose. You know, maybe a stand where you can run a connector to that stand, and then, you know, have the hose there. That's a tough one. Watering is a concern. You always have to, you know, where's the water going to come from? But maybe if you look into the water lines, that might be the most helpful for you, particularly if, yeah.
Oh, Marianne, so she goes on to say, this person goes on to say, we use a hose, but we have 35 beds that we water.
I think you have to have stations. Okay, so how about water stations throughout the garden? Is this a community garden or is there an allocated money for the garden so, you know, you can make improvements? In our community garden, we have about 45 plots, and there are stations that have water situated throughout the garden so that you don't have to walk tremendous amounts of lengths to drag a hose to the garden. And that might be the most reasonable thing to do if you can do that.
Okay. Marianne, another question. Have you ever gardened with other physically or mentally challenged individuals? Any stories you can share?
I have not. I have never gardened with any cognitively impaired individuals. And in terms of what other people have, you know, people might have, you know, hip and joint problems or stenosis, and they might even be next to me, but I don't even know that because people aren't always eager to say, well, you know, I have lumbar stenosis and I'm having a problem. so I don't know those sorts of things. I certainly have never seen somebody with a stroke next to me, although it's quite possible that people have had strokes. So the answer is I don't really know.
Okay. Another comment. I wear knee pads when I garden, like someone who lays tiles. My only problem is when I forget I don't have them on.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So our next one is, we call our garden handicapped accessible. Does it have to meet a legal definition?
Oh, gee, that's a great question. I never thought about that. I don't know if there is a legal definition for a handicap garden. This is the first time I'm hearing of it. I wouldn't know. I guess I would have to look at the ordinances in the town and or village that you live in to see if there is such a definition.
Yeah,
I,
public.
s- I s- yeah,
Oh, I'm
Amy,
sorry.
sorry.
Public buildings often have to follow, certain, they have to have certain procedures in place and adaptations in place.
Right. What about a community garden, though? Have you ever run into that?
Have not at this point.
Yeah.
We are trying to help to make Hartsbrook one of our demonstration gardens more accessible. And
Uh-huh.
people can get in on the one trail, but it could use, it could be more accessible. That's a public park, so I don't think they're required to do it. But they do have parking for people who can't walk
Right.
a distance.
Right. Right. I've never heard though of a garden having a need for paths this wide to accommodate wheelchairs, walkers, this and that. I've never heard of that or seen that either. So
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry. I have seen public gardens that do have those paths.
okay,
A lot of them do accommodate wheelchairs.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Would having a hose or hoses available be better than carrying buckets of water? You mentioned buckets being hard to carry.
I would say absolutely yes, because by the time you get to the garden, half the water is gone. In my in my experience. So the answer is yes. Plus, they're heavy and yeah, they're not the most stable things to carry.
Yes. Are there particular types of watering handles on hoses that are more friendly for hand issues? Smaller levers, etc., easier to squeeze?
There's a lot of hose attachments out there. When I was gardening, I had sort of like a long handled hose that had a lot of different nozzles on it. So it could reach up to plants on a trellis. Um, and it worked out fine. So I think it's at Hartsbrook now too. So I should take a picture of that someday. But that's the one that I use and I like the most.
Okay. And there are, just to answer the question from before, there are standards, 2010 ADA standards for accessible design at www.adata.org.
Oh, thank you for that information. I'll look it up. Thank you.
Okay, and I think that's it. Okay, any other questions?
Okay. I will just have a few closing thoughts, and we're here about 45 minutes. Looks like Charlotte still has her hand up. I'm going to allow her to talk for a moment. If she has a question, you can unmute yourself, Charlotte.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I find this very helpful because I recently got involved with trying to make our community garden at Heritage Hills more, I want to say, user-friendly. I don't want to use the word handicap because it gets involved, seems to get involved with too much legalese. And I find this, your lecture incredibly timely at this point. And any information that you have out there that that I could search online would be helpful. I've gone on a number of sites. They sort of give you a general picture of what's needed, but I'm trying to come up with a plan that I can present to our board. And if there's any information out there that you could provide.
You know, Charlotte, thank you for your very positive comments. After this slide is a bibliography, and there are several books that I read that were written by people who were disabled. And that's where I got most of my information from. So maybe Amy could send you that bibliography, and if you want, maybe I could get the books to you. I don't want you to go out and buy books if you don't have to. And
Well, I will.
just
I can go on the library. I can go to the library, maybe.
okay,
Mhm.
and you know, find the information. One was a book written by a man who was disabled and had a very prominent gardening position in the Midwest. I think he might have been in a wheelchair too. I found his story incredibly helpful.
That sounds great. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Okay, and we have a couple of more questions. One is just a general question. What's the last day of spring frost?
I don't know. Oh no, I'm sorry.
I think, Amy, what's the best resource for finding that?
For finding that,
Yeah.
there are the Northeast Climate Center has a lot of different maps for that as well. And generally, our frost can vary. It's been moving earlier and earlier over the last few years. It used to be in mid-May. Now it can be in mid-April. That would be the average frost. We can still see frost as late as, say, May 20th or 21st. If it's warm enough to plant, you'll want to make sure that you have protection ready if it does get cold. Often for warm season plants, though, it's better to wait until the weather settles so that the plants don't get shocked at all if it gets cold.
Okay. Another question, what do you use for planting small seeds and plugs?
What method?
Yes, I would imagine that the question would be if you really had dexterity issues, small seeds, how would they best be
Oh.
spread?
Well, you know how I plant small seeds is, let's say lettuce seeds. Lettuce seeds are pretty small. So what I do is, you know, the lids that come on the like Chinese takeout or whatever. What I do is I put a small amount of seeds on that lid, and then with a little tweezer, I pick up the seed and put it in the soil. It's easier with bigger seeds like radish seeds and so on, but that's been working out for me pretty good. That's how I do it.
Okay. And then someone has just given us a website for accessible paths. So it's https://greenwich.audubon.org/accessibility.
Oh.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of resources out there. We can pull them together. There are also cedars that sometimes they get clogged up, but it's a little piece of equipment that has a hole in it with different sizes that you can adjust
Oh,
to
yes.
allow the seed to come out. Some people like those as well.
Yeah. There is a seed, a little thing that they use over in the United Kingdom. So it's got like a little vacuum suction, and you can just press this bulb and sort of the seed comes out. I've never seen it here in the States, but I'm keeping my eye out for it. Someday it might get here.